What if I told you a $15 Ford part that most mechanics threw in the trash could make your '65 Mustang outrun a brand new Corvette? Today, we're cracking the code on Ford's best-kept secret. Picture this. It's 1967, and you're cruising down Woodward Avenue in your Mustang 289. Nothing fancy, just a clean coupe with dog dish hubcaps and a quiet exhaust. To everyone else, you look like the guy who drives to church on Sundays and never breaks the speed limit. But here's what they don't know. Hidden deep inside your C4 automatic transmission is a little aluminum box that's been, let's call it, massaged by someone who understands the dark arts of Ford engineering. Light turns green. That Corvette next to you revs his 327, expecting an easy win. What he doesn't expect is your Mustang to launch like it's been shot out of a cannon, holding first gear until 5,200 RPM, while his automatic shifts at a lazy 3,500. By the time he figures out what just happened, you're 3 car lengths ahead and pulling away. The secret? Ford's C4 transmission governor. And brother, this little piece of aluminum was the underground weapon of choice for anyone who knew how to use it. Let me take you back to 1964. Ford had just dropped the C4, their answer to GM's Power Glide and Chrysler's Torque. This wasn't some heavy-duty truck transmission. The C4 was built light, compact, and designed to fit behind everything from the little 200 cubic inch 6-cylinder to the screaming 289 Hypo. But here's where Ford's engineers got sneaky. They knew this transmission would end up in everything from grocery getter Falcons to weekend warrior Mustangs. So they built in a secret weapon, a governor system so tunable, so hackable, that it turned every C4 into a potential race transmission. The governor sat right on the output shaft, spinning with the driveline. Inside that little aluminum case were 2 weights, primary and secondary, each with their own springs and calibrated to control when your transmission shifted. Factory setup was conservative. Smooth shifts around 2,800 RPM for first to second, maybe 3,200 for second to third. Perfect for your mom's Falcon wagon. But the beauty was in the simplicity. Unlike GM's complex hydraulic systems, Ford kept it mechanical. Centrifugal force, spring tension, and basic physics. No computers, no sensors, just Newton's laws doing their thing at 60 miles per hour. By 1968, word was spreading through the Ford underground. Walk into any speed shop from Dearborn to Bakersfield, and you'd hear the same whispered conversation. You know about the governor trick? See, the hot rodders had figured out what Ford's engineers already knew, but couldn't advertise. That governor wasn't just a shift control. It was a performance tuning device, disguised as a maintenance part. And the best part? You could buy different governors from different Ford applications and swap them like Lego blocks. Here's how the magic worked. A Mustang 289 governor came with 4.2 gram primary weights and soft springs. File just half a gram off those weights, and suddenly, your car held first gear until 4,800 RPM instead of 2,800. That's 2,000 more RPM of staying in the power band, the difference between a grocery getter and a street fighter. But the real pros knew the combinations. Grab a governor from a 69 Boss 302, lighter weights, stiffer springs. Drop it into a regular 289 Mustang, and you've got a transmission that shifts like it's possessed. Or go the other way. Take a truck governor with heavy weights and soft springs, perfect for a big block that makes torque down low. I talked to an old-timer named Frank, who ran a Ford shop in the 70s. He told me, "Kid, I had a coffee can full of governors on my workbench. Customers would come in asking for more performance, and I'd just reach into that can and pull out the right combination. 20 minutes later, their car was transformed. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of how this actually worked, because understanding the science made you dangerous at the drag strip. The C4 Governor operated on pure centrifugal force. As your car accelerated and the drive shaft spun faster, those weights inside the Governor would fly outward against their springs. As they moved, they opened valves that sent hydraulic pressure back to the valve body, essentially telling the transmission, "We're going fast enough. Time to shift." The genius was in the calibration. Ford used different weight combinations for different applications. Falcon 6, 5.1 grams primary, 3.8 grams secondary. Early, smooth shifts. Mustang 289, 4.2 grams primary, 3.1 grams secondary. Moderate performance. Boss 302, 3.6 grams primary, 2.7 grams secondary. Aggressive, late shifts. But here's where it got interesting. The springs mattered just as much as the weights. Stiffer springs resisted the outward movement of the weights, delaying the shift point. So you could run lighter weights with stiffer springs and get a transmission that shifted hard and late under full throttle, but still behaved like a gentleman in traffic. The math was simple. Remove 1 gram from the primary weight, gain about 600 to 800 RPM before the 1 to 2 shift. Do the same to the secondary weight, and your 2 to 3 shift followed right along. Suddenly, your 289 was staying in its sweet spot instead of lugging around in high gear. What made the C4 Governor trick so powerful wasn't just the performance, it was the community that grew around it. This wasn't corporate-sponsored racing or magazine-advertised modifications. This was pure grassroots knowledge, passed from mechanic to mechanic, father to son, racer to racer. Speed shops became the nerve centers of this underground network. Guys would show up with shoeboxes full of Governors they'd pulled from junkyards, each one tagged with notes. 351 Cleveland, shifts at 5,200. 390 truck, good for torque. Boss 429, handle with care. The really serious builders took it to another level. They'd drill precise holes in the weights to remove exact amounts of material. Some guys added lead shot or tungsten putty to increase weight for specific applications. I heard about one builder in California who kept a jeweler's scale on his workbench just for weighing Governor components. But the best part was the experimentation. Unlike modern tuning, where you need expensive software and specialized equipment, Governor tuning was accessible to anyone with basic tools and patience. Mess up? Just swap in different weights and try again. Want to go back to stock? Keep the original parts and reinstall them. This created a culture of tinkering and learning that's largely disappeared from modern car culture. Guys understood hydraulics, centrifugal force, and mechanical systems because they had to. There was no YouTube tutorial or forum post, just trial and error, shared knowledge, and the satisfaction of making something work better with your own hands. Here's where the C4 Governor really shined, in the art of the sleeper build. See, in the late 60s and early 70s, everyone knew what a fast car looked like. Big hood scoops and wide tires, loud exhausts, racing stripes. But a Governor-modified Mustang or Falcon? That looked like your neighbor's daily driver. Picture this scenario. You're at a stoplight in your bone-stock-looking '68 Mustang coupe. Next to you pulls up a '70 Chevelle SS with all the badges, the cowl hood, the fat tires, the whole 9 yards. He revs his engine. You nod politely like you're just trying to get to work on time. Light goes green. His Chevelle launches hard but shifts into second at 3,500 RPM like most automatics of the era. Your Mustang? It screams to 5,201st, grabs second with authority, and keeps pulling while his car is already in third gear and falling out of its power band. The psychological advantage was huge. Guys in obviously fast cars expected a race, but nobody expected the grocery-getter Mustang to be packing a secret weapon. By the time they figured out what was happening, you were already gone. I heard a story from a guy named Mike who ran a modified '66 Falcon with a 289 and a tweaked governor. He said, "I embarrassed so many muscle cars that word got around." Pretty soon, nobody would race the slow Falcon anymore. They had no idea I was shifting at 5,500 RPM while they were done at 3,200. That's the beauty of the invisible modification. All the performance gain with none of the attention. Once the basic governor modification became common knowledge, the real innovators started pushing the boundaries. They realized that the C4's governor system was just one part of a larger hydraulic puzzle, and if you understood the whole system, you could create some truly wild combinations. The throttle valve was the governor's partner in crime. While the governor measured speed, the throttle valve measured how hard you were pressing the gas pedal. Adjust the throttle valve linkage, and you could make the transmission think you were at part throttle even when you were flooring it. Combined with a modified governor, this created a transmission that drove like stock around town, but transformed into a race unit under full acceleration. Some builders went even further, modifying the valve body itself. They'd drill out orifices to increase line pressure, install stiffer springs in the accumulator pistons, and even block off certain passages to force firmer shifts. When combined with the right governor setup, these transmissions would bark the tires on every shift change. The really advanced guys started mixing and matching components from different Ford transmissions. The FMX, Ford's medium-duty automatic, used a similar governor design, but with different calibrations. Some builders would take FMX governors and adapt them to C4 cases, creating shift patterns that no factory engineer ever intended. But here's what separated the pros from the amateurs. They understood that every modification affected everything else. Change the governor weights, and you might need to adjust the throttle valve. Install a higher stall torque converter, and your governor calibration might need to be completely different. You might think that with the rise of electronic transmissions and computer-controlled everything, the old C4 governor would be obsolete. But here's the twist. It's more relevant today than ever. Walk through any car show today, and you'll see C4 transmissions behind LS swaps, Coyote swaps, and even modern diesel engines. Why? Because they're bulletproof, rebuildable, and infinitely tunable. And that governor system that hot rodders figured out 50 years ago, it still works perfectly. Modern builders have taken the old school knowledge and supercharged it with new school precision. Instead of filing weights by feel, they use CAD software to design custom governor components. Instead of guessing at spring rates, they can calculate exactly what combination will produce specific shift points. I know a builder in Texas who specializes in C4 transmissions for street rods and muscle car. He's got a database of over 300 different governor combinations, each one tailored to specific engine and rear axle combinations. Want your Coyote swapped '65 Mustang to shift like a modern sports car, but still cruise comfortably on the highway? He's got the exact governor spec for that application. But the real beauty is that the fundamental principles haven't changed. It's still centrifugal force, spring tension, and hydraulic pressure. The same physics that worked in 1967 work just as well in 2024. The only difference is the precision with which we can now apply those principles. Here's what really gets me about the C4 governor story. It represents something we've lost in modern car culture. Today, performance tuning often means plugging in a laptop, downloading a tune file, or bolting on a pre-engineered kit. That works, sure, but it's not the same as understanding the mechanical systems and making them work better with your own hands. The governor forced you to learn. You had to understand hydraulics, centrifugal force, and how different components interacted with each other. There was no Stage 2 kit or 93 octane tune. You had to figure it out yourself, and that process of discovery taught you more about how cars actually work than any manual or video ever could. I remember talking to an old Ford mechanic who said, "Back then, we didn't have diagnostic computers or scan tools. If a transmission wasn't shifting right, you had to understand every component and how they work together." The governor taught us hydraulics better than any engineering textbook. That hands-on knowledge created a generation of mechanics and hot rodders who could diagnose problems by feel, fix things with basic tools, and modify systems in ways the original engineers never imagined. They understood that every car was a collection of interconnected systems, and changing one thing affected everything else. Compare that to today, where many performance modifications are plug and play. You buy a tuner, plug it in, select a program, and you're done. It works, but you don't really understand what changed or why. The governor modification forced you to think like an engineer, even if you'd never set foot in a classroom. Once word got out about governor swapping, junkyards became treasure troves for Ford guys. Every wrecked Mustang, Falcon, or Fairlane was a potential source of performance parts. But you had to know what you were looking for. The smart guys carried little notebooks with governor specifications written down. They knew that a '69 Boss 302 governor was worth its weight in gold, while a '73 Maverick governor was only good for a grocery getter build. Some governors were so rare that finding one was like hitting the lottery. I heard about guys who would hit multiple junkyards every weekend, pulling governors and cataloging them. They'd build up collections of dozens of different combinations, trading them like baseball cards. "I'll give you 2 Falcon governors for that Boss 429 unit." The really dedicated hunters learned to identify governors just by looking at the transmission case. Different applications had slightly different mounting configurations, and experienced eyes could spot a performance governor from across the junkyard. They'd pull the whole transmission just to get that little aluminum box. But here's the crazy part. Most junkyard owners had no idea what these guys were really after. They'd sell a complete C4 transmission for $50, not knowing that the governor inside was worth more than the rest of the transmission to the right buyer. This created an underground economy of Ford performance parts that operated completely outside the traditional aftermarket. No catalogs, no advertising, just knowledge and hustle. While street racers were using governor modifications to build sleepers, drag racers were pushing the technology to its absolute limits. At the strip, consistency was everything, and a properly tuned governor could be the difference between winning and going home empty-handed. Bracket racers especially loved the governor trick because it gave them precise control over their car's performance. They could tune the transmission to shift at exactly the right RPM for their engine's power curve, ensuring maximum acceleration without over-revving. But drag racing taught builders some hard lessons about the limits of governor modifications. Push too hard, make the weights too light, or the springs too stiff, and the transmission would shift so late that it would actually hurt performance. There was a sweet spot, and finding it required careful testing and data collection. The best drag racers kept detailed logs of their governor setups, noting how different combinations performed under different track conditions. They learned that a governor setup that worked perfectly on a cool October evening might be all wrong on a hot July afternoon, when the air was thin and the engine made less power. Some racers even carried multiple governors to the track, swapping them between rounds based on conditions. It was like having multiple transmission tunes, but accomplished with purely mechanical components. The really advanced drag racers started modifying the governor housings themselves, drilling additional holes, or adding custom machined components to fine-tune the hydraulic flow. These weren't backyard modifications anymore. This was precision engineering applied to 1960s technology. By the late 1970s, the golden age of governor modification was coming to an end. Emissions regulations were tightening, and Ford was moving toward more sophisticated transmission controls. The C4 itself was being phased out in favor of newer designs with lock-up torque converters and electronic controls. The new transmissions promised better fuel economy and smoother operation, but they came at a cost: tunability. Electronic controls meant you needed specialized equipment and knowledge to make modifications. The days of tuning your transmission with a file and a screwdriver were numbered. Many of the old-school builders resisted the change. They'd seen what could be accomplished with simple mechanical systems, and they weren't impressed by the complexity of electronic controls. "Why do I need a computer to tell my transmission when to shift?" was a common complaint. But the writing was on the wall. Insurance companies were cracking down on performance modifications, gas prices were rising, and the muscle car era was officially over. The Governor modification became a piece of automotive history, remembered fondly by those who lived through it, but largely forgotten by younger generations. For a while, it seemed like the C4 Governor would join the ranks of obsolete automotive technology. Interesting from a historical perspective, but no longer relevant to modern car building. Fast forward to the 2000s, and something interesting started happening. The resto-mod movement was gaining steam, and builders were looking for ways to combine classic styling with modern performance. Suddenly, the old C4 transmission was back in demand. Why? Because modern engines made so much more power than their 1960s counterparts, and the C4's simple, robust design could handle it. An LS engine making 500 horsepower was no problem for a properly built C4, and the Governor system that hot rodders had figured out decades earlier was perfect for tuning these high-performance combinations. Modern builders rediscovered the Governor modification, but now they had tools and knowledge that the original pioneers could only dream of. Computer modeling could predict exactly how weight changes would affect shift points. CNC machining could create custom components with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. But the fundamental principles remained the same: centrifugal force, spring tension, hydraulic pressure. The same physics that worked in 1967 worked just as well with a modern LS or Coyote engine. The only difference was the precision with which these principles could now be applied. Some modern builders have taken the concept even further, creating fully programmable mechanical governors that can be adjusted without disassembly. Others have developed hybrid systems that combine the reliability of mechanical operation with the precision of electronic control. The result is transmissions that shift with a crispness and consistency that would have amazed the original hot rodders, while still maintaining the mechanical simplicity they valued. So there you have it, the story of Ford's forgotten performance secret. A simple aluminum box that turned grocery getters into giant killers, taught a generation of hot rodders about hydraulics and physics, and continues to this day to help builders create the perfect shift pattern for their dream machines. The C4 Governor never got the recognition it deserved. No magazine covers, no factory advertising, no racing sponsorships. It just quietly did its job, waiting for someone smart enough to understand its potential and brave enough to modify it. But that's what made it special. This wasn't corporate-sponsored performance or marketing-driven modifications. This was pure grassroots innovation. Regular guys in their garages figuring out how to make things work better, sharing knowledge and pushing the boundaries of what was possible with simple mechanical systems. Next week, we're diving into another forgotten performance secret: Chrysler's legendary Sure Grip differential and the backyard tricks that made it nearly unbeatable at the drag strip. You won't want to miss it. So hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and let us know in the comments what other forgotten performance secrets you'd like us to uncover. Until next time, keep wrenching, and remember, sometimes the best modifications are the ones nobody sees coming.